As we wrap up another year in the garden, I find myself reflecting on the beauty of returning to basics. At the beginning of this season, I specifically told myself I was going to try to garden differently. And the theme this season for me was all about returning to basics. I wanted to grow plants from seed. I wanted to propagate plants and use the plants that I already had in my garden. This year wasn't about chasing the newest plant varieties or buying as much stuff as I could at the garden center. Instead, it was about just focusing on the fundamental joy of nurturing just the tiniest seeds or sharing cuttings with friends and just appreciating the beauty of God's creation. Hi, I'm Sue from Garden Moxie. Welcome to my channel. I garden in southeast Michigan. It's a Zone 6A, and my hope is to inspire Midwest gardeners to transform their everyday yards into charming retreats. And this video is about the year in review. The year got off to a really fun start. I sponsored a seed starting challenge, and we all came together and grew seeds. This was something truly special. There was something magical about getting together as a community. And each of us were able to share our tiny little seeds and show what we were growing. I'll never forget the excitement in everybody's messages as they shared their photos of their first seed sprouting. From experienced gardeners who still marvel at the miracle of growing a plant from seed, to complete beginners who couldn't believe that they actually were successful growing something from scratch. This was the perfect way to start the garden season. And it was the perfect way to start a year of getting back to basics. We learned together that success wasn't about fancy setups, and some of the most impressive results came from recycled yogurt containers and homemade lighting rigs. It was proof that gardening doesn't have to be expensive to be rewarding. My pollinator garden has also been a complete delight this season. If you stood still for just a minute, you would witness an entire world of activity. Every single day in the pollinator garden was filled with bees and moths and flies and butterflies. The area was just teeming with life, and it really drove home for me this very fundamental basic of gardening. That is how much of a difference we can make, just one tiny garden at a time. The transformation of my pollinator garden has really been especially rewarding because many of the plants that I'm growing there, I was able to grow from seed. And there's just something about watching a plant grow from a tiny little seedling until it becomes this beautiful plant that's super rewarding. I'm excited to continue to develop this pollinator garden. Now that the garden is somewhat established, the focus for me is going to be trying to get the garden to have blooms all season long. Right now, the garden is primarily at its peak in the summer, and I'm trying to add more plants that can support the pollinators earlier in the spring and then longer into the fall. So that's going to be the focus for the upcoming garden season. I've really learned the importance of taking lots of photographs during the growing season. When I went back to look through my year in review for this video, I really realized that I didn't have enough still images. And what's important for me is to take those images during the entire growing season. It's not as tempting to take photographs when the garden really doesn't look beautiful, but that's kind of the whole point. It helps us to see what kind of things we need to add so that the garden does look beautiful eventually all season long. Because gardening is about the process and the journey. And I find that the still images are such a powerful tool. July brought an unexpected challenge to my garden, and that was I discovered that I have box moth. Finding those telltale signs, that webbing between the leaves and how much damage was done in a short time, was not a fun experience. The boxwoods aren't just plants. I have grown those little trees since they've been tiny little shrub liners. And as somebody committed to the gentle practices of gardening, I'm reminded that we all face challenges, and I don't want to use harsh chemicals in my garden. The whole point of my garden is to create a wonderful little haven for all the critters that live in the area. Luckily, I was able to use BT, and it seemed like that worked, at least initially. So I'm going to be following this through the rest of the garden season as we move into the new garden season to figure out if I'm going to be able to manage the boxwood moth. Where this garden season was mostly focused on the pollinator garden in my front garden, the upcoming season is going to be focused on a renovation in the back garden. I've already started this renovation by removing most of the plant material that's in the 4 borders in my backyard. And this garden renovation is really going to be covered during the videos that I have during this winter time. There's something just exciting about planning during this quiet season. For us in the Midwest, this is not a time to actively be outside gardening. So when the garden is resting, it's a good time to use our imaginations so that we can run wild once the spring comes. I've been collecting historic gardening books that are just filled with forgotten wisdom about working with nature rather than against it. It's fascinating to me to see how many modern garden principles were actually very well understood by gardeners centuries ago. These old gardening books are like having conversations with gardeners across time, where they're sharing their knowledge and things that they've tested. These books are also providing inspiration that'll be new to me for plants to grow in my own garden. I love to read the gardening books that are written by gardeners that created their own amazing gardens. There's so much to learn about garden design from these types of books. Speaking of wisdom from the past, I want to let you know that I'm going to be having a wintertime garden design book club running from January through April of 2025. And if you're looking for inspiration during these colder months, feel free to join the Wintertime Garden Design Book Club. I'll leave a link in the description of the video. I'm going to be diving into books that cover influential design philosophies that shaped how we think about gardens today. And if you're too busy to read or you don't have access to the old books on the list, that's not going to be a problem. I'm planning to structure the discussions in a way where everybody can follow along. You don't even need to read the books. I'll summarize the main points and provide downloads with the main takeaways. I think it's going to be a fun way to spend the winter. This year has also taught me some profound lessons about the healing power of our gardens. Spending time here with my mom and watching her face light up at the sight of flowers in bloom or when she's planting containers on the patio, these are moments that I'm going to treasure forever. Even on the days when words fail her, she still remembers somewhere deep in her memory of how to garden. And the joy that I see on her face when she's in my garden really deepens my understanding of how our green spaces touch our souls in a way that words oftentimes can't express. I've started noticing how being in gardens really affects everyone. Friends that arrive stressed out from work really seem more relaxed in the garden. And once people start paying attention to the bees and the birds, there's just something about a garden that calls us back to ourselves and reminds us to slow down and notice the small miracles happening all around us. And these experiences have really strengthened my resolve to create a garden that's more of a sanctuary, not just for pollinators, but for people as well. I want to create a space where friends can get together, share stories, and just relax. With the simple act of cutting flowers or pulling weeds, it really does quiet your mind and soothes your soul. And looking ahead as we move into the next garden season, I'm really focused on creating more of a cozy little nook on my patio, so it can be more like an outdoor room to be enjoyed all season long. And one of the most rewarding parts of this year has been being able to share my love of plants with this awesome YouTube community. And I want to thank each and every one of you for watching my videos and being here. There's just something special about being able to share our experiences with like-minded gardeners. And each gardener carries a story, and it's a wonderful form of connection so that we can help one another grow. I'm really filled with gratitude for the simple things. Just to feel the sun on my head and the sight of those first seedlings and plants breaking through the earth, the sound of bees humming in a flower bed. Basically, this idea of returning to basics. I found something really profound this season. The true heart of gardening isn't in the fancy tools or the expensive plants, but it's in the connections that we forge with the earth, with each other, and with ourselves. My garden is more than just a bunch of pretty flowers. It's a living classroom, a healing space, and it's a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the smallest beginnings. That's it for this video, friends, and I'll see you in the next one.